Emily saw it. You were at a restaurant bar planning a trip with another woman. Oh, I see. And so what? Even when caught cheating, my husband Donald wouldn't drop his defiant attitude. In a moment, what we had built over 15 years crumbled away. In this day and age, I was a full-time homemaker, living with his parents just like every other year. I had given up the job I loved at a publishing company where I felt fulfilled, and now I spent half of the week accompanying my parents to the hospital and adjusting meals according to everyone's schedule. I was living a life much like a housemaid. After getting married, I had no time for myself. The only place I could relax was in our bedroom, even in this spacious house. Despite all this, I had chosen this life because I wanted to be with my husband. The option of leaving never crossed my mind, so when my adulterous husband said, "We can get a divorce, I was at a loss for words, feeling more amazed than angry. This is the story of me, Sophie Johnson, turning 40 this year, leaving my husband Donald after 15 years of marriage, and starting my life from scratch. It all began 2 months ago on the 25th. That day was payday for Donald, who worked at an electronics manufacturer. Usually, his salary would be deposited into our joint account. I would use that money to pay our monthly bills and give him an allowance in the evening. However, 2 months ago, his salary wasn't deposited into our joint account. I thought there must have been some technical glitch, so when he got home in the evening, I asked him about it. "What do you mean you changed the deposit account without saying anything to me?" He had switched the account to his personal one. "But what about our payments? These bills are due on the 27th. I couldn't keep up with a sudden change and just thought of immediate concern. "Just let me know how much you need, and I'll transfer that amount into the joint account," he said, taking off his suit with his back turned to me. He wouldn't even look me in the eyes. "So why did you change it?" I couldn't think of any reason. In the 15 years we've been together, we had never changed the account. We were saving in our joint account, so it wouldn't be a problem if his transfer was late. It's not that our bills would fall behind. Maybe I didn't need to press the issue, but I couldn't help wondering. Why didn't he trust me with our finances? Did I do something wrong? I didn't remember overspending, but I thought maybe I had unknowingly upset him. If so, I needed to apologize. That's what I thought when I asked him. But it seems like he thought I was blaming him. He threw his freshly removed shirt onto the couch and glared at me. "It's my hard-earned money, isn't it?" "Yes, it is. But why do I need your permission to use it?" What? I couldn't understand any of his words. I've been giving him a $500 allowance every month, but that was just a temporary arrangement. If his expenses piled up, I would give him more. I asked him what he spent his money on, but I'd never refused to give him more when he needed it. As a stay-at-home wife, there have been times when I asked if I could buy something I wanted, but the reverse never happened. "I don't need dinner today." "What?" "But I already prepared." "Never mind, I'll eat out." He got bent out of shape, grabbed his car keys, and went out again. He seemed strange. For the past 15 years, we've never had issues over money. But suddenly, he starts saying it's his money, while cleaning up the food I had prepared. I was upset at my husband's selfish actions. I was frustrated that despite having food at home, he chose to eat out anyway because now he was in charge of the finances. From that moment, he began eating out every night and coming home late at night after I fell asleep. Also, the number of days he told me he was staying at work overnight increased. The fight had completely escalated. Even when we were together, we didn't talk more than necessary. As time passed, it was hard to find a chance to make up, and I started blaming myself. We'd never had a fight last this long before. It was a minor issue that he changed the bank account without consulting me. If he wants to manage the finances, that's fine. After about 2 weeks of awkwardness, I began to reconsider like that. Then one day, I received a message from Emily, who was my colleague when I worked at the publishing company. "Hey, how are you doing? How about lunch soon?" Emily's message was a welcome surprise. We used to go out for drinks after work and spend our days off together when we were single. Now, with families of our own, we didn't contact each other as much but still tried to meet at least once or twice a year. Her invitation came at a good time, and I agreed readily. 2 days later, in the afternoon, we were sitting in a cafe in the next town. "So they moved into the care facility, huh?" "Yeah, both of them in the same place." Emily asked how things were going, and I told her about my parents-in-law moving into a nursing home a few months ago. "I know I shouldn't say this, but it's a good thing. It must be a relief for you." She looked pleased, knowing how much I had been struggling to find time for myself. She seemed relieved now. Well, I do have to get their clothes, visit, and accompany them to their doctor's appointments, but still, my life has become a lot easier. This was the first time since I was single that I was able to casually make time to meet with a friend. You're such a dutiful daughter-in-law. Is Donald still hands-off? Yes, he seems to want to do nothing on his days off. He never wanted to go anywhere on his days off. In these 15 years, we've never even gone shopping together. Her husband is diligent. He picks her up in his car when it rains and sometimes even does the shopping for her. He never changed at all. Well, since I am a stay-at-home wife, he could at least take care of his own parents. Emily never thought highly of my husband. When we got married, we both had jobs, but he never helped with the household chores. On days when I was too tired to do housework, he found it unbelievable and suggested I become a stay-at-home wife. I didn't want to quit, but I resigned as he suggested, becoming a full-time homemaker. Soon after, I was asked to live with his parents, and I ended up taking care of them. The reason I couldn't talk back to my husband was because of the significant difference in our incomes. He is 8 years older than me, already held a position at his company, and his income was more than double mine. Can you earn as much as I do? If you can, I wouldn't mind quitting. He'd say things like that, leaving me speechless. I had discussed my true desire of not wanting to quit my job with Emily, even crying on the phone, overwhelmed by having no time for myself. I understand why she holds a negative view of him. It's because of my venting. After a while, the warm vegetable salad we ordered arrived. As she served it on smaller plates, she spoke again. So, how are things with him? Upon being asked, I thought for a while and nodded affirmatively. I had actually come to discuss our big fight, but I didn't want him to be seen in a worse light. Emily paused, holding the serving tongs, and stared at me as I managed only to nod and smile, trying not to arouse suspicion. She stopped serving the salad midway. I'm sorry I asked it in the wrong way. Sophie, things aren't going well with him, are they? Emily's words made it seem like she knew something. I was left flustered and unable to respond as she started talking about something that had happened a few days ago. She recounted being at a dining bar near her office for a work after party. While heading to the restroom, she passed a man in the aisle who turned out to be my husband. He didn't seem to recognize her, so she decided against calling out to him. But noticing that he was in casual clothes made her wonder if he was with me. After leaving the restroom, she decided to take a look at where he was seated. What she saw was him having drinks with a woman who wasn't me. It hit me instantly. He's cheating on you. They were sitting close together, bodies touching as they drank. Was that really my husband? I couldn't believe it. He hadn't come home that day due to working overtime, so there was no reason for him to be in casual clothes. Moreover, he seemed genuinely busy lately. Did he even have the time for cheating in his current state? Although we've been on bad terms recently, I couldn't imagine him resorting to cheating. I just don't see him as that kind of person. Sensing my thoughts, she sighed and added, for the upcoming long weekend, he mentioned going to a place in Malibu. He was showing information about the accommodations on his phone and mentioned something about a prime-grade steak dinner. You could probably find the hotel if you search from there. She started searching for the hotel on her phone, while at the cafe I was still hoping it was just her misunderstanding. However, as soon as I got home, I started looking through his clothes. I don't remember how many clothes he has, so I wouldn't know how many of what item were missing, but I did notice that 2 or 3 of his favorite clothes were missing. Until last year, he would immediately wear them after washing, and they were always at the front of the drawer when opened. But now, they were nowhere to be found, even after searching every corner, the back of the closet, and the drawers of rarely used cabinets, literally everywhere. The only thing that came to mind was him working overtime and even on weekends due to his busy schedule, telling me he had spent a night in the company's restroom because he missed the last train. As I stood in front of the closet, the sound of an incoming email came from my pocket. It was a message from Emily. The email included the URL of a hotel in Malibu. As I stood there in a daze, I slowly pressed the link and a stay plan with a dinner including prime-grade meat was displayed. I felt dizzy, like I was having a bad dream. There was a part of me that still wanted to believe in him, but not finding his favorite shirt was a huge blow. 2 days later, the Saturday before a long weekend, he was unusually at home, working with the TV on. I placed a cup of coffee near his computer and casually asked, I haven't seen you wearing your favorite t-shirt this year. Even though he hadn't taken his eyes off the display when I put down his drink, at this question, the sound of him typing on the keyboard suddenly stopped. Then he said, "Yeah, I'll wear it sometime. making a point of looking at me as he responded. That was unusual. For the past month since that payday, he had been distant, but now, when asked about his shirt, he was making eye contact. I looked for it but couldn't find it, I added, trying to gauge anything from his reaction. He replied, "Isn't it somewhere?" and then looked away, returning to his computer. His reaction made me feel suspicious. Despite mentioning his missing favorite shirt, he showed no signs of being troubled. Normally, in such situations, he would pretend to be troubled just to emphasize that I hadn't taken care of it properly, even if he didn't really need it. Last year, he kept complaining just because it hadn't dried due to the rain. Every change seemed suspicious when it came to him. I couldn't control myself. I had to keep digging until I got clear answers, even if it meant going too far. "You're off for a long weekend, right?" Even though we hadn't reconciled after our last fight, I couldn't help but ask something more intrusive. "Work from when?" "I don't know. There's a business trip. I might have a day off." Was this also a lie? It seemed like it. After all, for the past 15 years, he always took time off during the holidays. Emily's words crossed my mind. Going to Malibu, as she said, mentioned the prime grade steak. Of course, as she also said, the story I heard at the cafe started to feel real, and I felt a surge of anger welling up within me. Before I realized it, I had said it out loud. "Business trip? You mean you're going to Malibu?" Uttering a word that I hadn't asked about, he who had been looking at the screen froze. He slowly turned around, but his expression had changed from earlier. With a weary face, he squinted and glared at me. It was the exact same look he had during our fight on that payday. "What the hell is going on?" Really rummaging around our room pretending to look for clothes? He sighed heavily. Hearing his words, my lips quivered noticeably. Indeed, I had rummaged through the room, but I found nothing. I couldn't find the t-shirt. Yet despite that, he said it, rummaged through his room. He said so, which means if I had rummaged more, I would have found something that linked to Malibu. I still wanted to believe even while doubting. "Emily says she saw it at the wine bar. You and another woman were planning a trip." The things we had built started to crumble away. "Oh, is that so?" I thought. At times like this, he would hardly make an excuse, but reality was different. He was not flustered at all. He turned away with a defiant look. "So what's the point?" I was even questioned in return. What does he want to hear? When I became speechless out of disbelief, he piled on words. "Who do you think you are? I'm working hard to earn money, enough for a stay-at-home wife to live comfortably." He yelled at me loudly and my head started to ache. I placed a hand on my forehead and took a deep breath. "I'm okay with getting a divorce, He uttered those few words. For the past 15 years, no matter what happened, no matter how hard it was, I had tried not to think about it. I was disappointed that he could say it with no hesitation. From that day, he continued to ignore me. Even worse, the moment he found out I knew it, he boldly started communicating right in front of me, like, "All right, I'll pick you up at 7 in the morning." The first time it happened, I was dumbfounded. Was he always like this? The person in front of me was a total stranger. As the long weekend and the day of his trip approached, I found myself in the car driven by Emily, silently witnessing his infidelity unfold before my eyes. "Sophie, did you get a shot of him putting his arm around her waist just now?" "Yeah. You should take as many photos as you can." "Okay." When I recounted my conversation with him on Saturday to Emily, she was furious and urged me to break up with such a foolish man. She also suggested that I take photos as proof of his cheating and claim for emotional damages. She spent her much-anticipated weekend for this very purpose. The woman he was cheating with was around her late 20s or early 30s, with a slim figure and wearing revealing clothes. Did he have a thing for her long hair? He stroked her hair over and over with a gentle smile on his face. Since he left the house, I promptly followed and watched everything. From when he picked her up from her apartment, even when he stopped by a convenience store to buy breakfast together, to when they started walking arm in arm in front of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Now, they just entered a hotel together. I took pictures of all of it with my phone, but each time I pressed the shutter, I pondered over what I was doing. I knew it, but seeing it with my own eyes made me really sad. But I didn't shed a tear. I just stared at his joyful face. That was my day. What do we do now? Shall we stay somewhere for the night? No, let's head back. It seemed she was planning to stay overnight, but I shook my head. I didn't want to waste the money I've saved by scrimping on such a thing. I thought our life as a couple had finally started after my in-laws had been placed in a nursing home. We hadn't been able to go on trips until now because we always took care of our parents first, but from now on, we wanted to create memories as a couple. The money I had planned to use for those times, I wonder if I'd just wasted 15 years. If I knew it would turn out like this, I wouldn't have married. If I knew I would go through this, I would have divorced him a long time ago. I shouldn't have had to endure and try so hard. Today, seeing his smile for the first time in a while, I wanted to redo those 15 years, though I wanted to cry. I couldn't help but keep sighing. She had been quietly listening, but suddenly she started the car engine and checked the time. What time is it now? After 3 o'clock. Then she made a call and smiled at me. Hey Sophie, let's move out right now. Ha! Hello, sorry to bother you during the long weekend. I appreciate your help. I was taken aback by her sudden proposal. She seemed determined to start something. Panicked, I shook my head at her while she was on the phone, but she ignored me and continued, saying, "It's all good." From that moment, Emily was full of energy. While driving, she used her car's navigation system to call various places and gather people to come to my house. About 3 hours later, we actually arrived home in the evening, about 2 hours after that, but within just 1 hour, all my belongings in the house were packed into cardboard boxes. It was truly unbelievable. I didn't want to talk about work since you didn't want to quit, Sophie, but I've transferred from a fashion magazine and now I'm the editor-in-chief of a local magazine. In the car, she made various calls to the moving company, real estate agency, and even to a lawyer who knows Donald. She expertly adjusted the schedule so that the Certus people's visiting times did not clash. I followed her instructions meticulously. Minute by minute, I packed only my valuables into a box, leaving the rest to be handled by the movers. The real estate agent introduced me to a house that could be moved into within a few days. Meanwhile, my belongings were sent to her house, and I ended up staying with her for a few days. After the truck packed with my things left, I was visited by a lawyer who provided advice on claiming alimony after divorce, guiding me towards the least burdensome method. I was amazed at how much could be accomplished in just a few hours. I knew she was a very proactive person from our time working together, but her efficiency was truly remarkable. However, as I looked around the now half-empty room, anxiety slowly began to creep in. He's definitely going to be mad. The cost of moving was surprisingly low. The studio apartment was affordable, and even the consultation with the lawyer was free, yet it still required money. I made these decisions without consulting him. I'm sure he'll be furious when he gets back from his trip. As I felt our relationship deteriorating rapidly, I became depressed. Then she slapped my back. Hey, being a homemaker is a respectable job too. The money you've saved from being frugal is also yours. Plus, it's his fault. He said he'd transfer the necessary money, right? So let's have him pay even for the cost of living on your own. After being strongly persuaded by her, I took one last look around the house. I remembered how in the early days I had found it difficult to rearrange things. Now, I realized I had placed my toner on the bathroom vanity without hesitation. The shoe rack was filled with my shoes. I had always seen myself as a maid, but maybe I had actually become part of the family. After imprinting the image of the home I had lived in for 15 years in my mind, I made up my mind and nodded vigorously at her. Then, on the last day of the long weekend, I left the house I had shared with him. I was still staying at Emily's place. "Where are you at?" I picked up the call from him with a trembling hand. He asked that with a grumpy voice. Without answering his question, I said the words Emily and I had decided on beforehand. "You said you were okay with a divorce, right? And that you would transfer the necessary money. I am divorcing you. Please provide for the costs of me living alone." "What? Stop talking nonsense and come back." He seemed to think this was just a runaway. I cut off his voice and spoke my final words. "Please have your new partner take care of your parents from now on. Thank you for 15 years. While he was still talking, I hung up. He called back several times, but I didn't pick up. I did feel guilty about how I ended things unilaterally like this, but looking back, I had always accepted his unilateral demands ever since we got married. So I tried to think it is fine, at least in the last moment. The following year was a whirlwind. I negotiated with him through a lawyer and finally secured a divorce with alimony and living expenses assured. Finding peace of mind was a struggle until I landed a job as an office clerk at a local factory, slowly building my life with my monthly salary. "Sophie, can you make the deadline this month?" "Yeah, I'll make it, but I think I'm going to barely make it by the deadline, so I don't have time to chat on the phone." All right, I'll go now. You have your piece this month too. 6 months ago, Emily, who manages our local magazine, added a new section about saving money, and as a frugal person, I've been given a chance to write a couple of pages there every month. I gave up on my dream to work in a publishing company. Her arrangements mean a lot to me. Now I'm a writer, but I have 15 years of experience in budgeting as a homemaker, and I want to share my experiences wholeheartedly. I was able to make a fresh start. Then an unexpected call came in. It's good to hear your voice. Sounds well. Mother-in-law. My mother-in-law called me from her nursing home. I had said my goodbyes to her before my divorce, but in that time, I couldn't talk with her well. I hadn't contacted her since the last time, so I was surprised that she called. After talking about my father-in-law's advanced dementia, she updated me on my ex-husband's situation. What? He broke up? Yes, that's the case. He's foolish, isn't he? Between us, he was dumped before the divorce was finalized. I see. Seems like his relationship with that woman has already ended. Well, that's expected, isn't it? Any young girl would run if she had to deal with taking care of seniors. So who is at the home now? Donald. He ended up leaving his big corporate job, but he's trying with his complaints. He's such a fool. He was able to work because of his wife supporting him behind. He still doesn't talk about his own infidelity. Sophie, breaking up with him was the right thing to do. My ex-husband hasn't changed, but it seems like he's struggling a bit. I found myself a bit relieved by hearing that. My usually stern mother-in-law chuckled and said, Sophie, thank you. I was planning to ask you to try again with him when I called, but your voice sounds so lively, so I decided not to ask. In the roughly 15 years we lived together, I'd never had such a long conversation like this with my mother-in-law. Our relationship wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. I listened to her voice. I assumed this would be the last time I'd hear from her, and I savored every word. It turned out for the best, she said so sadly, and my tears welled up. It's been a year since my divorce. Everything has been going well, and I've managed to make a fresh start. However, I've always felt a lingering sense of regret. It's because I felt that I had wasted 15 years of my life. But then, with this phone call, my mother-in-law said it, thank you, and that she had planned to ask me to try again with her son. There's no chance of getting back together with my ex-husband, but hearing that from his mother made me genuinely happy. It felt like a validation of what I had done for those 15 years. I will never forget this phone call from her. Those 15 years were not wasted because now I believe that so.